And hi, everyone. Welcome to eLearnChat, where talk, it's knowledge. And today we're going to have a great talk with some good friends. We've got Karl Kapp with us today, and we've also got Leslie Price, our co-host. So here we go. And we are back. Well, Leslie, you had a very busy week this week with Learn Appeal, and your first, is that the first one that came up, capsule that came up live in, was it Nigeria?
It's the first capsules overseas that we've sent out.
It's exciting.
And the reception, we had a lot of trouble getting the capsules shipped out. I don't know if you know, Karl, but what I do at Learn Appeal is we're providing both the disconnected and the disadvantaged with a fully interactive offline e-learning system.
Oh, fantastic.
So we're using a Raspberry Pi and a Wi-Fi router, and the Raspberry Pi, our wonderful friends at Apatir have managed to get a fully functional learning management system working on it. So we think we're one of the world's first to be taking truly interactive offline learning to places where they have no internet or they can't afford the internet. And it launched on Friday of last week, and our contact out there just says, oh my God, I am holding a magic box.
That's awesome.
It is pretty cool.
That's all he could say to me. I'm holding a magic box. And it's like being online, and I'm not getting any messages that are saying your data charges are running out. He said it's all free.
Wow.
That's pretty cool. Well, congratulations.
Isn't there a saying that says advanced technology is indiscernible from magic? So you've done magic.
Hey, who was it that said that? I know that line. Who was that?
I've heard it before. I can't
remember. It's a great line. It's so true.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know. All I've got coming into my head is the Queen song. It's the kind of magic.
Yes.
And the oldies amongst us will remember that one.
Yeah, that would be me. So, Karl, what you been up to? You're always up to something new, exciting. Any new books? You had one last year, the last time you were on. And
I did, yeah. So it was Arthur C. Clarke who said that.
It was Arthur C. Clarke. You're right.
He's a writer. Yeah. And magic is indistinguishable from sufficiently advanced technology. Kind of neat.
He's probably right. If you think about it,
he's got his computer in front of him, Rick.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you. My wife Leslie, who you've met, she just had a little laser treatment yesterday, and this was a red laser light. She has just a real tad beginnings of macular degeneration. And the doctor said, you know what, let's do the laser light on you. What that laser light does is they kind of paint the inside of your eye with it, and it stimulates the individual photosensors in the macula, and then it triggers the body's autoimmune system to heal itself. She wakes up this morning and she goes, oh my gosh, I'm seeing better out of this eye than my good eye. She couldn't believe it. She goes, everything's sharp.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. That's magic. Light.
That is.
Simple light.
Yeah, very neat stuff. Yeah, it's just amazing. We're at Memorial Day weekend here, so we drove down to the shore. My in-laws have a house down here, and my wife had to do work, and she just put her personal hotspot in, and the whole way down she's able to be on the computer. I mean, it really is amazing.
It is. It's magic. It's also burning our brains out, but that's another issue.
Honestly, Karl,
it is destroying us very quickly.
If you and your wife lived in Kenya, my colleague out there sent me a 45-second video on WhatsApp because that was the cheapest he could send it. And it cost him 1,000 Kenyan shillings, which is about £7 in UK money.
Hey, I thought WhatsApp is free.
For us, 45 seconds, £7 seems a lot of money.
Yeah.
But when you think that is 20% of the average wage of an agricultural worker for a month, it would be the equivalent of somebody on minimum wage in the UK having to earn £240 to see a 45-second video.
Wow. I thought WhatsApp was free.
No, you have to be connected to the internet.
Oh, so he had to connect
WhatsApp
to pay. Oh,
free,
got it.
But it's the connection to the internet.
The internet's not free? Oh, wow.
No. No, but Rick, for people like you and Carl and I, it feels like it's free.
It does.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Carl,
I'll stop going on about Learn Appeal.
Yeah.
Neat. Well, I don't have anything that exciting, Rick, but I am working on a couple cool things. I actually recently created a card game called Zombie Instructional Design Apocalypse, and then kind of a spin-off called Zombie Sales Apocalypse. I might actually have a copy somewhere here in my bag of tricks. And it's basically, I was finding here it is. I was finding a really interesting trend in that there's a little bit, we're talking about technology and how magic it is, but there's also a little bit of a backlash against technology and how it kind of dehumanizes us in some ways. In some ways, gives us lots of opportunities, but in some ways dehumanizes us. Yeah. So card games and board games, I find, are making a resurgence. So created this game to kind of help people kind of connect over a table. If you're at a sales meeting or if you're at an instructional design conference or workshop, you can kind of connect there. So that's been kind of a fun project that I've been working on. And then on the video end, I created a video-based game where it was basically a branching simulation with zombies. Basically, again, there is a theme here, but basically, so I read something today that was funny. It said, if a vampire bites a zombie, does the vampire become a zombie or does the zombie become a vampire? Right
now, that is an existential question right there.
Right, isn't that something to ponder? But so I have a video game, and that's kind of cool. What we're actually doing is each selection in the game is tied to a rubric and a different dimension of the rubric. And then what we're doing at the end is we're going back to the score and seeing where the learner is on the larger sales rubric. So kind of excited about that process.
Sounds fun. And you can't beat zombies. Zombies are fun.
No, you can't. Yeah, everybody likes. Although I have had several people tell me like, okay, you had me until zombie. And other people said you had me at zombie. So I think it was Tom Peters who said, do something that people either love or people hate.
Or hate. Or they love to hate.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and that's funny.
Or you just don't care. I'm afraid I'm not interested in zombies.
Exactly,
that just means you haven't met any cool zombies. That's all.
Right.
No, it actually means I read all of Frankenstein when I was growing up.
Neat.
So,
what a neat story.
I was one of the people that actually, when I was at school and studied English, one of the novels you did read was Frankenstein.
Yeah. I think actually it would probably be beneficial for a lot of researchers and scientists to read Frankenstein. I mean, the message was really interesting about how humans think they can control technology, but not always.
And there's a lot of talk about cloning humans and this and growing parts, and you just go, oh, there's that slippery slope coming up again.
That's old now, Rick. That goes back to Dolly the sheep.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. But now they're talking human cloning as it's okay. I don't know. There's so many slippery slopes we're on right now. I don't know how big the slope's going to get. It's a little scary sometimes. I like the idea you have of creating a board game. And, our daughter, for example, she grew up with us at home, and we had board games. She loves board games. She's 28 right now, and nobody wants to play with her. They go, what's a board game? Why don't we play on the computer? She goes, no, this is more fun. Why would it be fun? We'd have to be with each other.
Right. But actually, interestingly, I think 2000...
It is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. My children are the complete opposite. So they absolutely love board games.
Oh, they were fun.
And when my daughter got married, you know, they had the big wedding and whatever. And then while they were waiting for all the food and, you know, between the speeches and the food, on every single table, my daughter had put a board game.
Interesting.
And everybody then played board games. And then it was, oh, well, we've maybe got to eat now. Let's put the board game to the side and then we'll bring it back.
That is a great idea. Yeah, I really like that a lot.
And board games aren't really popular anymore, not like they used to be.
Yeah, they seem to be.
My kids, they are.
Well, it's interesting in little pockets. So in actually 2016, there were 5,000 new board games released.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So what was happening, you know, with Kickstarter and that kind of stuff, people were creating games. You know, the card game Exploding Kittens was the largest Kickstarter project ever, and it was this card game where you basically collect kittens, and then there's this one kitten that's exploding kitten. If you get exploding kitten, you lose, but you can play cards to counter the exploding kitten.
Interesting.
It's really kind of it's really fascinating, but I see that kind of growing a little bit in backlash. You know, there's always, you know, the futurist Daniel Burrus once said, the future is an and, not an or. So there will be paperless and paper. There will be board games and video games. There will be, you know, the Kindle and books. So I really think that's kind of the future in front of us.
And really, when you think about it, you know, when you look at some of the games, you know, maybe the internet helps you cheat a little bit. Trivial Pursuit comes to mind.
Interesting.
Yes. Well, I read the other day this whole thing about this guy that has
I certainly, when my kids were growing up, you know, computers were in their infancy, but I wouldn't say I banned them, but we'd quite a strict guidelines in our house about when you're on the computer and when you're actually doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's all. I think that's always a good idea. Yeah, absolutely.
So, how are people reacting to the board games in the, let's say, in the conference rooms and in other places? So,
actually, it's interesting. I have a couple of clients who asked for business. They call them simulations, but basically it's a business board game, and they're using the board game to take the approaches that senior management does and put that into kind of a board game. So you have to make certain decisions. You have certain inputs that go into the decisions. You have certain resources that you can access. And they want to kind of teach them, the up and coming leaders, to access and to think about solving problems the same way that those senior leaders do. So we're taking some of the mental models of the senior leaders and codifying them in kind of a board game environment, which is kind of neat. And then I'm working with some folks at Bloomsburg. One of the things that's really hard for people that are non-accounting majors is to understand how does a balance sheet work and income statement and cash flow. And so there's a whole genre of business games where basically the board is a disguised income statement and balance sheet. So you have a little cash, and you have work in process inventory, and you have raw materials, and you have liabilities and owner's equity. And so I'm working with a professor at Bloomsburg, and he and I are putting together this board game to help teach his managerial accounting students how to think about certain accounting issues and how to translate, you know, a sale or a return or a depreciation into balance sheet items and income statement items. So it's really kind of exciting, and it really seems
amazing, Carl. I love it. Yeah. Can you please do one for marketing?
Yeah, sure. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
The reason I say that, I actually had a conversation with Patty Shank, maybe in the last couple of weeks. And Patty and I were just talking about memory and how important memory is and the way that memory affects learning and behavior and everything else. And I said, first time I heard about memory was actually when I was studying for my marketing degree, when we were doing selective attention, retention, distortion, and how that she was then talking about how memory applies to learning. And I said, well, it's exactly the same in the way it applies in marketing. If you're trying to brand something, or you're trying to, you're trying to get people to remember things, it is all about you see what you want to see, you remember what you want to remember, and then you distort it to fit in with the way your life is. And I think learning has an awful lot to learn from marketing. And it'd be great if you're doing a game on accountancy, wouldn't it be great to do one on marketing too?
It would be, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm hoping to cover, kind of a wide range. It's interesting. There's high-end companies that do very expensive board game simulations, and they're very customized. There's some others that are a little bit more basic, and so I'm hoping this one will kind of be in the middle. So I'm really excited working with the professor to now I have a lot to learn about accounting, so he's kind of shepherding me through that accounting process. But I said, you're the subject matter expert, but I think I can bring some game design sensibilities to this, and certainly talking to a marketing professor and doing some things along those lines. But it's really a kind of an exciting time. And the neat thing about board and card games is that they're much easier to prototype, and they're much easier to test out than a video game where you have to program it, develop it, and all that kind of stuff. In fact, I'm doing a workshop in New York for ATD on creating tabletop games in sometime in July, I think it is. So we're really trying to help people kind of get traction around that, and marketing would be a great topic.
Carl, one of the things
I used to talk about with my students, for example, when they were coming into college, most of them came in by bus or by car, and they would pass these huge billboards that companies must have spent, not only money on designing the advertising that went on it, but also on the placement of the billboard. And I would say to them, and how many billboards did you see on your way in today? And what did they say? And most of the time I would get this completely blank look going, oh, I don't know. What should I have seen? And if you think about learning and the way that you associate that with learning, how much do people see that they could learn from, but don't realize it's a learning experience?
Well, it's also interesting because when you talk about learning experiences, and this is something that people don't talk enough about, and that's the role of emotion in learning. We know that emotions trigger memories or create memories. But we rarely use it in e-learning. Most companies go, no, we don't want anybody smiling, nobody laughing, nobody this, nobody that. So you lose any sense of emotion in the training. So people don't remember it. There's no retentive value to it. And yet, if you can make something that gets some emotion out of people, then you may be able to retain it, or maybe even use it. Carl,
you get that in board games for sure. How many people do you know who have got so cross playing Monopoly?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Or Risk.
Yeah.
Risk. Yep.
Risk. Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. So I think Frank Zappa once said that what computers lack are eyebrows, because eyebrows show emotion.
Yeah.
So I really think it's important to add that emotional element into any kind of game that you develop, and that's why I think games are so appealing, because and it has to be managed, right? So we did a workshop one time and we were playing this game just to introduce the concept of game-based learning. Actually, Settlers of Catan, which is a really good game. This woman, though, she lost. She wasn't happy with her performance, and she checked out for the entire workshop. She was so upset about not being able to. So, that definitely is a risk. That emotion is great for learning, but it also a good facilitator would look at the apex or just where they're at the apex of frustration and then step in or ask for some help or something like that. But I think the emotional aspects of games can be very helpful. And the other thing that they do is they allow you to consider the unthinkable, right? So back in the 1970s, actually, there was a game that was branded by BP, and it was about oil rigs in the ocean. And one of the scenarios in that game was what happens if you have a blowout in the middle of the ocean? Like, how do you handle that, or all that kind of stuff. Now imagine if people had trained on that and thought about that, then when it actually happened, it wouldn't have been so shocking or out of left field. People would have been more prepared to handle it. But if you say, oh, we might have a blowout, people go, nah, we have all the safety precautions and that would never happen. But in the game, you suspend your disbelief a little bit, but you can also get caught up in the emotion of dealing with some issues in the game. So I think there's a lot of advantages that we really don't think about. I mean, I always like to go back to how kids learn. So if you look at kids, one of the things that they do is they play school. Like, they're in school all day. So why do they come home and play school? Because they're practicing the socialization that happens in school. Somebody's the teacher. They get to play roles that they aren't used to, but what's it like to be the teacher? And so I think all those kind of things, sometimes when we become adults, we're too serious to do that, or we can't play or whatever. But play and creativity and innovation are all so closely linked that when we don't do that, I think we sell our organization short.
I totally agree. And I think that play has an awful lot to do with learning. You were talking about the blowout there. Can you imagine what it would have been like if somebody had maybe created a game about dropping rubbish and the damage that plastic does? And then you relate that to the damage it does to our animals and our sea life. And kids, certainly my kids and most kids that I've ever known, are totally passionate about animals and everything else. And if they could see the impact that it would have, they would be playing a game to want to avoid it. And then they take that learning into real life.
Right, exactly. Well, if you think about it, games are nothing more than a series of systems. And the advantage of a game is that it compresses times. So you can see the result of an input into a system much sooner, and you can even exaggerate the consequences a little bit, so you can get an understanding of how the system functions and how the system works and what are the impacts of tweaking the systems. And I always say, especially when people say, people shouldn't be playing games and games aren't serious. So I give 3 examples. One is the military was one of the first organizations ever to have games, and they deal every day with life and death. The medical industry adopted games very quickly when they came out. Games, simulation, and again, they're dealing with death every day. And then finally, in the United States, a really interesting thing happened. So the CIA, a couple guys from the CIA presented at a games conference. I don't remember if it's GDC or whatever. And so in the United States, they have the thing called Freedom of Information Act. So these guys presented the CIA game, but they're like, we can't tell you a whole lot because, it's CIA information. Somebody filed a Freedom of Information Act against those guys. A year later, they released all the rules, all the cards, everything so I'm not quite sure how I feel about that guy, but I don't know if that makes us safer or not, right? But if an organization like the CIA, who is trying to do counterintelligence, and the neat thing about that is, there's one game where you try to catch Noriega. There's one game where you try to do intel and then counterintelligence. So you might play, I'm going to listen in on somebody's cell phone, and then somebody plays like, oh, well, I'm going to encrypt it. So then you kind of block people. But it gets people to think differently about, okay, well, if he blocked the cell phone, what's another way to get that data or to get that information? So I think games really allow us to approach problems, as you said, about plastics and other problems facing the world or organizations from unique and different viewpoints, without the like, oh, that'll never work, or we tried that 10 years ago and it was unsuccessful, or who are you trying to kid, or we've always done it that way. The game can get rid of all of those pieces of baggage and just let you kind of be immersed in that experience. And then the really important part is the debriefing afterwards, right? What did you learn? What did we do? What were some things that you thought about? So anyone that plays games from a learning perspective has to have that debriefing part so that we know that the right lessons were learned. The other thing is that the games provide a common experience. So, you bring a bunch of managers together and maybe they're geographically dispersed, and the common experience is the company, but they're just trying to get to know each other, et cetera. But you play, a simulation tabletop board game, and now they can talk about, remember how, we had the same problem, but we decided to do it this way. Oh, no, we didn't do that. We did this, and we played it this way. So now you have this common experience that you can build on, and it really makes, we call the game social accelerants. It really allows people to have deeper conversations much more quickly than some kind of superficial icebreakers and things. And I can imagine at the wedding, you're sitting at a table with people you may or may not know, but playing a game, you get to know people very well.
Yeah, I mean the other thing I should probably say is when I was a lecturer I lectured in community college. So I lectured both undergraduates and postgraduates. And one of the subjects for my sins was applied business economics. So how the whole circular flow of the economy works. And that is actually very challenging when a lot of the time you're talking to young people who don't understand economics. So I used to play a game called the Treasury game. And I used to give them 3 targets, one on employment, one on growth of GDP, and one on inflation. And then they had to make decisions about different things. And then I would throw in, stuff saying, so-and-so has increased their inflation rate, or such and such has happened, or da-da-da-da-da. And I worked with them in groups, and I used to do it in a lecture hall with 200 students at a time. And I put them all in groups of about 5 or 6, and they were all coming running up and down to the stage to get the next bit of information from me. And that made it even more exciting because they wanted to be the first one to run up. And then even then, within a group of 5 or 6, what was interesting, you then got some young people who were saying, we are going for austerity. We need to save money. And you got another 2 or 3 that would say, no, we need to spend. We need to spend money on the National Health Service. We need to be doing this. And sometimes some of the young people just used to storm out of the room because they got so involved in the game. And at the end of it, there was no real winners or losers, as in any economic situation. There's no winners or losers. But what they told me at the end of it is they actually began to understand what it meant when they were going to be voters. Mm-hmm. So they were going to be voting in local elections and in general elections, and they now understood what the language and terminology meant, and they learned it all from a game.
Well, it's interesting. One time I was at a UPS store, and they had a stamp. This is talking about financials. And the stamp said, please pay us so they can pay you. So please pay us so we can pay you and they can pay you. I mean, so it's the whole circle of please pay us, so you can pay them and they can pay you, or they can pay us. And it really encapsulated everything. It's a big circle. Everybody owes somebody something. It's sort of interesting. Yeah. Karl, what else have you been doing with the games? It sounds like that's a new, interesting approach that more companies are taking. And it makes sense because a lot of companies, especially the big ones, are diverse. They're everywhere. And their management teams are also everywhere. They're not, some of them are even remote. And they never get together. So when they do, it's an interesting use of energy, time, effort for them to not only get to know each other better, but also to learn how to work better together.
Yeah, it solves a lot of problems that organizations have, right? You get to know somebody very well so that you can pick up the phone later on and give them a call, or they'll answer your emails. Yeah. It allows you to work on, seemingly intractable problems. It allows you to codify systems and procedures that you use in your organization. It allows you to develop problem-solving protocols and practice those. One of the things that we know about expertise is the concept of deliberate practice, right? Where you not just practicing over and over again, but practicing with a purpose and a goal in mind and those kind of things. And this allows you to go ahead and do that. So games, I think, are great systems for promoting a lot of those concepts and really helping organizations to understand. I was at an insurance company one time, and we were playing a game that a company had developed about insurance, and the idea was to get as many customers as possible. Well, it turns out, as we went through the game, the only real way to get customers was through acquisition of smaller companies. And all of a sudden we came to this realization that there was very difficult to organically grow new, insurance. And they're like, that's the whole idea. We want to kind of get across the message that, we've got to work differently if we want to grow organically, because all our growth to this point has been through acquisition. And at some point that ends, right? So that's really kind of neat. And then, if you think about the MIT beer game, so there's a game, I think it was developed back in the 60s, where basically it's about supply chain, and very interesting, where you work for a beer distributor, because, college students, and you basically, it shows you the whipsaw action of trying to pre-order or anticipate orders, and you order too much, production can't keep up. Finally, production does match what you thought the demand was, but by that point the demand has shifted. And so they're really great ways to think about systems and how systems interact. So a lot of organizations are really thinking about that. And some, it's interesting, and some we can't call it a game, we have to call it a tabletop simulation, but basically it's a game. Yep,
that's interesting. Well, and
I've had a lot of fun with it. Yeah, it's been good. And even card games. The neat thing about card games is the Zombie Sales Apocalypse game that I was talking about is basically a disguised role play, right? So people don't like to role play because they already know how to do everything. But again, when you look at what people know from a sense of expertise, I'm reading Anders Ericsson's work. He has a book called Pearl, which is really fascinating. And he talks about how deliberate practice really leads to learning, but some people are motivated to practice and some people aren't. Because he doesn't believe that there's any innate talent except for height and a little bit of physical attribute, but not much. But he said basically, if you train the right way, you can kind of do almost anything, which is really interesting, and at the right age. But basically, this card game is a bunch of roles, and you draw a card, you do a role play. But then the neat thing is somebody can challenge you. So let's say that you give an answer, somebody can say, no, add more, or that's wrong, here's why, or add something new, or I can do better, or, so that forces the people who are all in that group listening to the role play, who usually check out, but because they can challenge you in the role play, and because it's a game, so it's not personal, they actually pay much more attention, and it's much more engaging than just their typical everyday sales role play. And then you customize that to your own organization's sales model, because everybody has a unique sales model, but it's the same. But anyway, they use different names and stuff like that and different approaches. But basically, you can customize it to your organization, and then your organization is having role plays and experiences that are unique to your organization. But people are talking about it. People are thinking about it. People are saying, well, no, maybe you should try this, or, hey, I've had a similar experience and here's what I did. So what they really do is they build dialogue, and that dialogue is how adults learn.
Yep, that's great.
Doesn't that then take us back, to the very beginning? So it's like we're ending tonight's conversation where we were at the beginning, where we're saying that is how children learn. And children learn a lot of the time from playing games, whether it be board games or just playing games with dolls or teddies or cars or whatever. They're playing games and they're learning about life through games. And it's a very, to a child, if anything happens to a dolly, if Dolly falls out the pram, if Teddy falls out the pram, that's dreadful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl. It's, if you lose playing football or whatever you play in the United States, it's rugby and football here. I don't know, is it baseball, basketball, American rules? I don't know, NFL. But it's still, it's games.
Now, that's an interesting concept, too, because if you look at sports, there's a certain element of competition. And if somebody's over-competitive, then it's winning at any cost, which isn't good. But it's really interesting when you look at certain ball games or like football games in the U.S., and one team destroys another team. Now, some people go, "Oh my God, they were so nasty. They were so mean. They didn't give them points. Why should you?" And I'm on the other side. My daughter and I are going, "Yeah, kill them. Yeah, wipe them out. Let's have a rout. We like routs. They're fun." And it's
it depends on which team you're rooting for.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so funny how people get and they feel sorry for the person who lost. Well, did you ever think maybe they weren't prepared? They didn't practice hard enough. The other team was simply better. Oh no, it must be equal. But things aren't equal in this world. It's just sort of interesting.
You hear some athletes or whatever, and sometimes I'll tell you, like, one of my first games out, I got destroyed, and I said never again.
Right. They get motivated to play better, to work out, to practice.
I quite genuinely, I agree with you, Carl. I'm 100% behind you. I think that if we can connect gamification, and I hate using that bloody word. I hate it. If we can tie games with learning, if we can combine games and learning, then maybe they can be fun, but we can also get the passion that we had as children when we were playing these games, or as athletes, whether we're actually playing the sport or whether we're watching it. And that can be brought into learning and then improve our productivity and everything we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to call it game thinking, or thinking like a game designer, right? So when approaching an issue or an organizational learning need, as opposed to gamification, think about, what would a game designer do? Because game designers design for engagement, they design for outcomes, they design around specific goals, they design with failure as an option, but as an option that you learn from. So all those kind of elements, I think, kind of combine and are things that can bring back that passion and interest in learning and allow people to be creative and innovative and think differently, which are all things that we really want to have in an organization.
Yep, great conversation. And with that, we're going to have to cut this one short. It's almost time. Karl, as always, a great pleasure to have you on. Are you going to be out in California anytime soon?
I'm actually doing another Linda course on I just talked about gamification. That's actually gamification of sales. So
interesting.
Should be out I should be out in California maybe in January or so, but I'll let you know.
Let me know. We'll get together for dinner again.
That was great. Yeah,
that's fun. I don't know if we'll ever get Leslie out of.
If you ever want to come to the UK, you're more than welcome to come to South Oxfordshire.
Oh, fantastic! Yes, so I'm on sabbatical this year, so I intend to do some traveling. So maybe.
Behind me is a field, and 100 meters beyond that is the Ridgeway, which is the oldest road in the UK. Wow. Dates back 5,000 years.
Wow!
Oh, fantastic! Neat.
It was recently repaved, right?
No.
Just kidding.
But Patty and Greg Shank did walk along it, and Greg, Patty's husband, said, "I am never ever going to wash these boots again."
Oh, funny.
What is on them is potentially 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting. Well, anyway, thank you for coming on, Karl, again. We look forward to seeing you next time.
It was lovely to meet you, Karl.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
And Leslie, till next week.
Yeah.
And for all you folks watching, please subscribe, give us feedback. Oh, before I forget, Karl, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So probably Twitter. So at KKAPP is a good one. Or my website is just karlkapp.com, KARLKAPP.com. And my email is same thing, karlkapp@gmail.com.
Okay, and we'll put that in the show notes then.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, great. Well, we'll see you folks next week. Or actually, we'll see you in about 20 minutes. We have another show, actually, that wound up being scheduled that way. And we'll see you soon. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.